Today we are going to be talking about oral and nonverbal communication. Oral and nonverbal communication are essential components in human and business interaction. First, we will be talking about oral communication.
What is oral communication? Oral communication is the sharing of information and ideas between individuals by using speech. This is especially important within a workplace, as the Business Dictionary states it must be effectively used to be readily understood. When communicating, one must also be sure to use the appropriate enunciation and tone with the intended message. Why is oral communication essential? Effective oral communication is key in ensuring messages relayed by the sender are understood by the receiver. There are, however, some things to consider in communicating verbally. Here are some important things to keep in mind. First is clarity. You want to be as clear as possible so it's easy to comprehend. Next is concision. Remember to be brief and don't add any elaboration or excess details that are not needed. Lastly, persuasiveness. A successful communicator is able to use persuasion in their communication. Effective persuasive communication can make others not only listen but care about what you're saying. This communication could also influence them to act in a certain way.
So what are the challenges associated with verbal communication? According to studies from both the University of Colorado and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, many of these challenges derive from three major categories. The first is cultural and language barriers. Even with the help of translation, there are words and phrases that may make sense in one language, but they may be difficult to translate in another. When this happens, the entire intent of the message can be lost. When we communicate, oftentimes we already assume what the other individual is trying to say. When we do this, it is easy to misunderstand the message or information that they are in fact trying to relay. It is important that we give others time to finish what they are saying and give ourselves enough time to analyze what is being said before we respond. Lastly, it is imperative that we remain engaged in the conversation so we do not become easily confused. There are so many distractions happening around us, it is easy to get lost in the dialogue. There are many tips and important details to help us avoid these common mistakes that are associated with verbal communication. Remember, effective oral communication is key in ensuring messages relayed by the sender are understood by the receiver. Most desirable and productive communication happens to be a cooperative communication approach, meaning conversation is not just a one-way street. Those that are speaking should seek feedback from the receiver. They can do this by asking the receiver if their message made sense to avoid any confusion and/or language barriers. If not, the speaker could then ask additional follow-up questions to ensure the receiver understands his or her message. As for the receiver, it is crucial that he or she actively listens to the message and paraphrases what they hear to assure the speaker they understand the message. Remember, we were not born expert communicators. Effective communication is best learned by practice.
In this section, we're going to talk about the use of nonverbal communication just in general throughout life and in the business setting as well. Nonverbal communication is how we communicate without using words. So things essentially like our facial expressions, our gestures, our posture, our tone of voice, they're all examples of how we communicate together and how we actually give cues without saying them explicitly. So during a conversation, if someone's saying something that you don't like, you're going to give a face that's going to tell them you're not going to like it. We're always communicating and we don't know it. So 70 to 80% of our communication is actually nonverbal. So the facial expressions you make, the hand movements you make, your body expressions, it's all a process between exchanging cues between individuals, and that's how we so far learned to communicate and actually respond and use our communication without saying stuff effectively to help us grow as society.
Okay, now we're going to talk about some of the ways that nonverbal communication is used in our everyday life. Things like our body language, posture, facial expressions, gestures, appearance, eyes, body movements, and space all affect nonverbal communication. It is also possible to communicate nonverbally in words. How we write and say our words in sentences can convey a certain emotion. This is also known as tone. It's not necessarily what we are saying, but how we are saying it and the way that it is received by the recipient. There are times when these are very useful, and you should be more conscious about them. When you meet someone new, or speaking in public, or even giving a presentation. For example, if you're stuttering over your words and standing rigid, the audience is going to know that you're nervous because of the cues that you're giving them. 85% of what our audience takes away from our presentation is from our body language, facial expressions, and cues. You can use your expressions to cement and reinforce what you have stated in your presentation. While nonverbal communication is very helpful and useful, there are also many challenges associated with it. Our cultural differences, unintentional cues, and misinterpretation of signals can all make it challenging to use nonverbal communication. However, we have to do it. So here are some of the ways to improve nonverbal communication. Learn to read body language, research and study how to conduct yourself in specific situations, learn to manage stress in the moment, and develop emotional awareness. We hope these tips and tricks about oral and nonverbal communication will help you in your future communication. Thanks for watching.